Hello friends, today I am going to reveal some true facts of why was there a communist revolution in Russia in 1917. Why was there a communist revolution in Russia in 1917? But first of all, I request you to please share and subscribe my channel for getting my informative true facts videos uninterrupted. Now, come to the subject. Why was there a communist revolution in Russia in 1917? Factors that led to the communist revolution in 1917 was the weakness of Tsar Nicholas II, the discontent of the peasants, the discontent of the workers, the failure of the Duma, Russian failure in the First World War, opposition of the communists, Rasputin and scandals, the February Revolution 1917, weakness of Tsar Nicholas II. The ruler of Russia was Tsar Nicholas II. He was an absolute monarch, meaning that he had total power in Russia. Nicholas was a weak man. He second police, the Okhrana, to prosecute opponents. Books and newspapers were censored. The church supported the Tsar, the little father of the Russian people. Nicholas II ruled a vast country that was almost medieval in comparison to other countries. The Tsar's undemocratic government was a major cause of the revolution. Failure of the Duma. In 1905, Russia lost a war with Japan. This defeat caused strikes in the Russian cities. The Tsar nearly lost control. Nicholas II offered to call a Duma or parliament with free elections. This was accepted by the demonstrators. When the Duma met, it began to criticize the Tsar and demanded changes. Nicholas II did not like this at all. The Duma was dismissed and new elections controlled by the Tsar were called. It became clear that the Duma would be shut down if it criticized the Tsar. As long as the Tsar had control of the army, his power could not be broken. The discontent of the workers. Industrialization began much later in Russia than in Europe, Western Europe. Huge iron foundries, textile factories and engineering firms were set up. Most were owned by the government or foreigners and were located in the big cities such as St. Petersburg or Moscow. By 1900, 20% of Russians were workers living in cities. Working conditions in the new industrial towns were very hard. Pay was very low. Although strikes and demonstrations were illegal, they often took place. Strikers were frequently shot by Tsar soldiers or secret police. The whole day we pour out our blood and sweat. Every minute we are exposed to danger. That was Union Leaflet 1898. It was quotes on Union Leaflet 1898 was, the whole day we pour out our blood and sweat. Every minute we are exposed to danger. These are feeling of the workers. The discontent of the peasants. Russia was a rural society and over 90% of the people being poor peasants. Until 1861, the peasants had belonged to their masters who could buy and sell them like animals. When the peasants were freed in 1861, they were given small amounts of land for which they had to pay back the government. As a result, most farmers were in absolute poverty. Agriculture was in desperate need of modernization. In contrast, a small number of upper class people held most of the wealth and power. Their aristocracy had large townhouses and country estates. Police report into country condition 1905. One report is there. Very often the peasants do not have enough allotment land. They cannot feed themselves, clothe themselves, heat their homes, keep their tool and livestock, secure seed for sowing and lastly pay their taxes. These are the police report into country condition 1905. Russian failure in the First World War. In the first few months of the First World War, Russia fought better than had been expected. Russian forces attacked Germany and Austria-Hungary in 1914, and we are only pushed back after years of fighting at the Battle of Tannenberg. In 1915, George Nicholas II assumed personal command of the Russian armed forces. This was a risky policy. Any defeats would be blamed on him. As it turned out, the Tsar was a poor commander. The Russian army lost confidence in the Tsar after a string of serious defeats. Russian soldiers, poorly trained and equipped, lacking in basic items such as rifles and ammunition, suffering from lowering morale, thousands of men deserted. Without the support of the army, the Tsar position becomes increasingly precarious. Rasputin and scandal. While Tsar Nicholas II was absent commanding Russian forces during the First World War, he left the day-to-day running of Russia in the control of his wife, Tsarina Alexandra. Alexandra came increasingly under the influence of Gregory Rasputin, a holy man who appeared to be able to heal the hemophilia of Prince Alexia on the heir to the throne, heir to the throne. Rasputin used his power to win effective control of the Russian government, but this aroused envy and was murdered in 1916. Rasputin's influence undermined the prestige of the royal family, but his murder came too late to save them. This is an important point. I will go to repeat this. Rasputin and scandals. They are closely related. While Tsar Nicholas II was absent, commanding Russian forces during the First World War, he left the day-to-day running of Russians in the control of his wife Alexandra. Alexandra comes increasingly under the influence of Gregory Rasputin, a holy man who appeared to be able to heal the hemophilia of Prince Alexis to the throne. Rasputin used his power to win effective control of the Russian government, but this aroused envy and he was murdered in 1916. Rasputin's influence undermined the prestige of the royal family, but his murder came too late to save them. Opposition of the communists. Many middle-class liberal and social revolutionaries who supported the peasants opposed the rule of the Tsar, but the most revolutionary were the social democrats or communists. The communists believed in the idea of Karl Marx. Marx claimed that history is all about the struggle between the classes. He claimed that the capitalist system was unfair because the factory owners made profit from the toils of the workers, the proletariat. Marx predicted that the proletariats would violently overthrow the bosses and take control of the country on behalf of the people. The Russian communists were divided into the Bolsheviks led by Lenin and the Mensheviks led by Trotsky. Lenin believed that the small party of the Bolsheviks should seize power and control Russia on behalf of the people. Before 1917, Lenin and many of the other communist leaders were in exile abroad, plotting to bring about the revolution in Russia. The February Revolution 1917. Russia fared badly. Russia fared so badly on the First World War. There was a spontaneous uprising against the Tsar in February 17. This was sparked off by food riots, poor working conditions, and the failure to win the war. The Russian army refused to shoot at the demonstrators and joined forces with them. Lenin, in exile in Switzerland, raced to Portugal so that he could attempt to seize control of the revolution. In March 1917, without the support of the army, the Tsar was forced to abdicate and a provisional government was set up under Prince Lvov and Kerensky. Lenin believed that this new government was weak and would not impose communism on the Russian people. In October 1917, Lenin led an armed uprising against the provisional government. His aim was to take control of Russia and turn it into a communist country. How did Lenin impose communist control in Russia between 1917 to 1924? It is very much important. factors that helped Lenin impose communist control in Russia 1917 to 1924 is important. That is the amendment of the Constituent Assembly, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk 1918, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk 1918, the Cheka, the Civil War 1918 to 1921, the execution of Tsar Nicholas II 1918, War, Communism, and the Constant Revolt 1921. Constant Revolt 1921. Here are the factors. The amendment of the Constituent Assembly 1917, it is important. The amendment of the Constituent Assembly 1917 is important. Straight after the October Revolution of 1917, Lenin promised to hold up elections for a parliament to be known as the Constituent Assembly. Lenin renamed the Bolshevik Party as the Communist Party in order to win wider support. He changed the name as the Communist Party in order to win his support. However, the Communists only won 175 seats out of 700, not enough for a majority. Therefore, Lenin shut down the Constituent Assembly after only one day. Lenin was not prepared to share power with anyone. He was not prepared to share power with anyone. This was the first step in setting up a communist dictatorship. The Cheka, or secret police. In December 1917, Lenin set up a secret police force known as Cheka. Cheka agents spied on the Russian people in factories and villages. Anyone suspected of being anti-communist could be arrested, tortured and executed without a trial. When opponents tried to assassinate Lenin in 1918, he launched the rape terror campaign against the enemies. Rape terror campaign. It is said that 50,000 people were arrested and executed in this period. 50,000 people are arrested and executed in this period. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk 1918. To successfully impose communist control in Russia, Lenin realized that he would have to bring Russia out of the First World War. He feared that the war might bring about an end to communist rule. By the time the Russian army was weakened by poor morale, desertions and breakdown in discipline, it was incapable of resisting the Germans. In March 1918, Russia signed a humiliating peace treaty with Germany. Russia lost a huge amount of land in the West. This included about 1/6 of the population, 60 million people, 3/4 of its iron and coal, and over a quarter of the best farmland in Russia. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk came at a high price for Russia. But Lenin knew he could not defeat Germany and his opponent in Russia at the same time. Lenin knew that he could not defeat Germany and his opponent at the same time. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk 1918. The Civil War 1918-21. Civil War important. 1918 to 1921 for 3 years. The opponents of the Reds, Lenin, and the communists were known as the Whites. The Whites were a mixture of aristocrats, royalists, churchmen, army officers, and many others. The Whites were led by Admiral Kolchak and Generals Denikin and Wrangel. The Whites were supported by Britain, France, Japan, and USA, countries that were alarmed at the possible spread of communism. At the same time, Lenin fought a war against Poland, a new country formed by the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. Although in a very dangerous position, the communists were able to win in the Civil War. This was because the Whites were divided, while the Reds controlled the key cities, industrial centers and communication links. Trotsky's tough leadership of the new Red Army proved decisive in the victory over the Whites. Communist Russia besieged during the Civil War 1918 to 1921. Leon Trotsky, founder and commander of the Red Army, said, "Every scoundrel who incites anyone to retreat or to desert will be shot. Every soldier who throws away his rifle will be shot." The executions of Tsar Nicholas II, July 1918. After his abdication in March 1917, Tsar Nicholas II and his family were arrested and sent to Siberia. In July 1918, the Romanovs were in the Ekaterinburg with the White Army closing in onto town. Local communists were worried that the Tsar might be a rallying point for the fights. As a result, Tsar Nicholas, his wife, their 5 children and 4 attendants were shot and bayoneted. War Communism. To win the civil war and impose communism in Russia, Lenin needed a strong Red Army supplied with weapons and food. The state to take control of the factories and appointed managers to run them. Work was hard and long. Food was rationed to only those who worked, and trade unions were banned. To get enough food, the Cheka seized all surplus grains from the peasants. The peasants hid food preferred to grow less rather than to give it away free to feed the town. Drought and famine hit Russia in 1921 and over 4 million people died. At that time, 4 million people died. The Kronsk Revolt 1921, Kronstadt Revolt 1921. Communism made Lenin government very unpopular. Discontent amongst the peasants led to the violence in the cities. Workers went on a strike in spite of the death penalty for striking. The most serious opposition to Lenin's government came in March 21. Sailors at the Kronstadt naval base near Petrograd revolted. They accused Lenin of breaking his promises to help the workers. Lenin ordered the Red Army to put down the revolt. This caused 20,000 casualties, and the leaders of the revolt were executed. However, the mutiny was a warning to the Lenin that he might have to relax war communism. So, Kronstadt Revolt 1921 was very much important. Success of the new economic policy 1921. To resume popular support, Lenin relaxed the war communism with the new economic policy, NEP. Small industries were returned to private ownership and peasants could sell their surplus on the open market. This was a return to capitalism and competition. Lenin hoped that NEP would give Russia a breathing space to get back on its feet. Most of the communist parties saw the need for NEP, but some were against it. On the whole, NEP, New Economic Policy, was a success, but it did create some problems. Some peasants, the kulaks becomes rich, while nepmen or businessmen made a profit in the town. Some saw NEP as a betrayal of communism and returned to the old system. When Lenin died in 1924, he had been very strong, very successful in imposing a communist dictatorship in Russia. Communist dictatorship. He had defeated all of his opponents and established a strong communist government. At each of the areas formerly belonging to the Tsar and came under communist control, they were formed into a socialist republic. In 1923, this became the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic, USSR. But Lenin failed to provide a clear successor on his death. This led to 4 years of bitter struggle. Lenin failed to provide a clear successor after his death, This led to 4 years of bitter struggle. Now, the main question was, who would succeed Lenin? At that time, Trotsky, Red Army commander and the Commissioner of Foreign Affairs, was powerful, and Stalin, Commissioner for nationalities, was powerful. Stalin was powerful. How did Stalin rule the USSR between 1928 to 1941? It is important. Stalin ruled the USSR 1928 to 1941. The struggle for power, Stalin via Trotsky. The struggle for power, Stalin via Trotsky, important. After the death of Lenin in 1924, there was a 4 year after the death. It was a very important question, very important. After the death of Lenin in 1924, there was a 4 year power struggle between Joseph Stalin and Leon Trotsky over the succession to the Russian leadership. Trotsky believed that under his leadership, Russia would become a catalyst for the spread of communism across the world. He had been very successful as commander of the Red Army in the Civil War and appeared to have Lenin's support. Stalin had not played a significant part in the revolution of 1917. But since they had gathered control of a number of key posts of the Communist Party, Stalin was determined to win control of Russia for himself. He was not interested in international communism. He wanted to make Russia strong and with himself at its head. He wanted himself at his head. In 1921, Stalin emerged as the successor to Lenin and Trotsky was forced into exile. Reasons for Stalin's success. When Lenin died, he had warned the Communist Party of Stalin's threat in his political testament. When Lenin died, he had warned the Communist Party of Stalin's threat to his political testament. Comrade Stalin, having become General Secretary, has great power in his hand, and I am not sure that he always knows how to use that power with sufficient caution. This was the word of Lenin. The word of Lenin. I am going to repeat this. Comrade Stalin, having become General Secretary, has great powers in his hand, and I am not sure that he always knows how to use that power with sufficient caution. Comrade Stalin is too rude, he also said. Lenin also said, Comrade Stalin is too rude. Reasons for Stalin's success, this is an important question. Reasons for Stalin's success. Although Lenin had not supported him, Stalin was in a strong position. As General Secretary of the Communist Party, Stalin had responsibility for appointing posts in the party. This meant he could remove opponents and replace them with his supporters. He was also popular in the party as he wanted to concentrate on turning Russia into a modern, powerful state. This approach was called socialism in one country. Socialism in one country. In contrast, Trotsky was much less popular. He had been a Menshevik and had only joined the Bolsheviks in 1917. Trotsky was dismissed as commissioner for war in 1925 and from the Central Committee in 1926. In 1927, he was expelled from the Communist Party and forced into exile in 1929. Stalin and Trotsky assassinated in Mexico in 1940. Stalin had Trotsky assassinated in Mexico in 1940. Other leading figures of 1917, Kamenev, Zinoviev and Bukharin were also removed by Stalin. All the positions were removed by Stalin. Stalin's dictatorships, purse and propaganda, it was important. Even with his opponents removed, Stalin still felt unsecure. He conducted a policy of purse between 1934 to 1938. Millions were arrested, executed or sent to labor camps. Stalin used the NKVD, the second police, to undertake the Great Terror Stalin purged. Stalin used the NKVD, the second police, to undertake the Great Terror Stalin purged. 90% of the army's top officers, every admiral in the navy, and 1 million Communist Party members. Some 20 million ordinary Russians. At the same time, Stalin encouraged a cult of personality. Propaganda was used to make people aware of the part Stalin was playing in every aspect of life, work, home and leisure. Stalin's face is seen everywhere. His name is spoken by everyone. His praises are sung in every speech. Every room I entered had a portrait of Stalin hanging on the wall. It is love or fear, I do not know. A foreigner described the glorification of Stalin in the USSR at that time. When a foreigner visited, he described that Stalin's face is seen everywhere. His name is spoken by everyone. His praises are sung in every speech. Every room I entered had a portrait of Stalin hanging on the wall. Is it love or fear? I do not know. It was fear. Reason for collectivization. Reasons for collectivization. Agriculture in developing slowly correlates. This is because we have about 25 million individuals on farms. They are the most primitive and underdeveloped forms of economy. We must do our utmost to develop large farms and to convert them into grains factories for the country organized on a modern scientific basis. This was the wording of Stalin in 1928. Collectivization. In the late 1920s, Russia suffered a food crisis. to feed starving workers, Stalin ordered the seizure of grain from the farmers. But just as happened under war communism, the peasant hid food or produced less in 1929. Stalin announced the collectivizations of farms. The most common was the kolkhozs, in which the land was joined all together, and the farmer owners worked together and shared everything. Stalin persuaded peasants to join by attacking the kulaks, peasants that had grown as a result of the new economic policy, NEP. Collectivizations had limited success and at a terrible human cost. Between 10 to 15 million people died as a result. Between 1931 and 1932, there was a famine in Russia, or not enough food was being produced by 1939. Russia was producing the same amount of food as it had in 1928. Collectivization was clearly a disaster, and the problem was even worse as its population had increased by 20 million, all of whom needed feeding. At the time, productions of that time, grains, 1928, 73.3 million tons, 1934, 67.6 million tons. It was less than 1928. Cattle, 1929, 70.5 million, and 1934, 42.4 million. Less. Pigs, 1928, about 26 million was there pigs, and 1934, 22.6 million, totally less. Sheep and goats, 1928, 146.7 million, and in 1934, 51.9 million only. Stalin said in 1931, we are 50 to 100 years behind the advanced countries. We must make up this gap in 10 years. Either we do it or they crush us. The 5-year plans of Stalin. Stalin believed that industry could only develop through state control. Under God's plan, 3 5-year plans were set targeted between 1928 to 1941 to increase the production. Russia's industry changed enormously. New towns such as Magnitogorsk grew up, and large projects such as the Dnieper hydroelectric dam were developed. The USSR became a major industrial country. The human cost was high. Forced labor killed millions, working conditions were very poor, and hours of work very long. The effect of Stalin's rule on men and women. Millions of people suffered in Stalin's purse, workers, peasants, and members of the Communist Party itself. There were brutally prosecutions, executions, and forced labor. Millions died of starvation and overwork. Millions died. The shops were empty, clothes were dull and badly made, and household items were difficult to find. Or the USSR was a communist state. The dictatorship of Stalin was just as complete, and in some ways even more bloody than that of Hitler. But despite these appealing tragedies, there were some positive aspects to Stalin's rules. For example, schools were built and social insurance schemes were introduced. Russia became a modern industrial country. The Great Patriotic War, 1941 to 45, important. When Germany attacked the USSR in 1941, Stalin used the same ruthlessness to defend his country. The defense of the USSR was the bloodiest war in history, and the cost to the lives of millions of people and the destruction of thousands of villages, towns and cities. The final victory in 1945 was, like everything else but down to the personal leadership of Stalin, was a Soviet propaganda machine. After the war, Stalin built up the USSR as a superpower, and in opposition to the USA, this conflict was known as the Cold War. Stalin died in 1953. This was known as Cold War. Stalin died in 1953. In my next video, I will give some more aspects of Russian history. Thanks.